Today I'll be going over Chapter 10 of Nancy Rook's book, Inside Graceland. Chapter 10 is titled, Life After Elvis. Nancy writes, "We were all a little worried that the death of Elvis would mean the end of our service with Graceland. Luckily, we were wrong." A few days after Elvis was moved to Graceland, Vernon gathered the staff in the kitchen and shared news that reassured and encouraged them. He did not plan to make many immediate changes at Graceland. He sat in a chair and told them, "You have all been a part of Elvis's world for so long, and nothing has changed as far as this being the Presley home. As long as I'm able to do so, I intend to keep it that way. After all, my mother and my sister still live here, and that's not going to change." Nancy says Graceland continued to operate much the same as before, with the staff carrying on their usual duties to keep the household running. Some changes did occur among Elvis's close friends. For instance, Charlie Hodgej, who had lived at the mansion for years and was like family, moved out. Although several stories later claim that Vernon told him to leave, Nancy says that wasn't exactly how it actually happened. Charlie wanted to continue earning the pay Vernon gave him, but with Elvis gone, there was little for him to do. Vernon asked if he would help with security at the meditation garden by watching over Elvis's gravesite. Charlie briefly helped watch over the gravesite, but with little to do, he decided to pursue his own work and began managing a small musical group in Memphis. When Vernon learned Charlie was managing a music group, he told him he would need to choose between working for Graceland or pursuing that work. Charlie decided it was time to move on. Nancy writes, Billy Smith, who had moved his family into a double-wide mobile home on the back of the property that Elvis had provided for him, also moved out. There were some bad feelings over that. He had assumed that Elvis had given him the mobile home as his own and informed Vernon that he was planning to move it off the ground somewhere else. Vernon, on the other hand, told Billy that Elvis had never intended that the mobile home be given to Billy and informed him that it would have to stay. Billy, who had been a faithful family member as well as friend and employee to Elvis for so many years, had to leave with nothing to show for his years of service. After divorcing Dee Presley in the Dominican Republic, Vernon moved into the updated annex apartment at Graceland in 1978. The renovated annex included 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a new kitchen, and a living room, and Vernon continued managing Graceland's affairs from the back office with the help of secretaries. Vernon began dating a nurse named Sandy Miller, and they grew close, with Vernon getting along well with her 3 children. Although his life seemed to be improving, his health, especially his heart, was beginning to decline. Nancy writes, "On October 26, 1978, we had to call an ambulance for him because he was complaining of chest pains. He was taken to Baptist Hospital, the same hospital Elvis had been taken to, at about 3:30 that afternoon. It was determined that he had suffered another heart attack. The doctors told us that it was serious, but that he was stable. I went to visit him the next day. He had told me over the phone that he was hungry. In a weak voice, he laughed and told me, 'Nancy, you know how much I hate hospital food, and this is some of the worst I've ever seen. I sure would like to have some of your home cooking.' She took him what he asked for, chopped steak, string beans, mustard greens, a baked potato, and hot rolls, and he ate every crumb. The doctor said Vernon seemed to be improving, and the next day Nancy prepared his requested meal of fried chicken, cabbage, and cornbread. She sat with him as he ate, and the conversation turned to farming. Vernon said, 'I've always loved farming,' and he asked if her husband was still farming a lot, and she told him yes. He asked, 'Will you have him plant some peas and white corn for me?' She told him yes. By early November, Vernon was well enough to return home, and although he looked frail and tired, he was happy to be back. On his doctor's advice, Vernon tried to walk a little each day, but he was too weak, so he was usually moved around the mansion in a wheelchair. Vernon was often wheeled into Dodger's room so they could spend time talking, as she too had begun heavily relying on a wheelchair. Sometimes they'd wheel them both around the grounds of Graceland just to get them out of the house. Vernon began losing his appetite and weight, making him look increasingly frail, though Nancy occasionally managed to get him to eat some of his favorite foods, dumplings, corn, and peas. It gave them brief hope he might improve. Unfortunately, Vernon's condition continued to worsen, and he often needed oxygen. The only time he seemed to brighten was when Lisa came to visit. He dearly loved his granddaughter. Nancy writes, "He passed away on the morning of June 26, 1979. Another legend was now gone from Graceland. He, like his son, laid in state in the same spot in the living room, in front of the music room doors. Afterward, a service was conducted with friends and family attending, and on a warm, sunny day, his casket was then carried out the front door and wheeled down to a waiting grave between his son and his first wife in the meditation garden. Less than a year later, in May of 1980, Dodger died peacefully while lying in her bed late one night. As maids, we had taken turns sitting in a chair with her around the clock in case she needed anything. I had gone home earlier in the evening and was not there when she passed away. Nancy did not see her again until her body was brought back to Graceland and laid in state in the same living room where Elvis had been. The repeated funerals became stressful for everyone. Nancy remembered how beautiful she looked in a blue dress, and she still deeply misses her close friend. Although the crowd was smaller than Vernon's funeral, many friends and family attended. She was buried in the meditation garden as well, completing the Presley family plot. The family was together again. After Dodger's death, the back office was no longer open daily. The secretaries were eventually let go, and the maids began answering the remaining phone calls to the mansion. Over time, trusted family members were replaced by hired staff, and the personal way the mansion had once been run gradually shifted toward a more commercial approach. Nancy says the close-knit group of trusted people who once worked together was gradually disappearing, and the personal human touch that had defined the household was fading away. Nancy writes, "A few months before she died, Dodger had gotten tired of the way things were changing around Graceland. She felt that people were being hired who did not have the family's best interests at heart, and she wanted the world to know about it. She got so frustrated at one point that she had actually called one of the local TV stations and told them to send a camera crew out to the front porch of Graceland so she could give them a statement about how she felt. She was already in her wheelchair and had instructed me to wheel her to the front door when, at the last minute, Aunt Delta finally was able to talk her out of it. But she continued to feel that way up to the day she finally died. She had been the stabilizing force, the feminine touch that had kept Graceland going, and now she was gone." Now Aunt Delta was left living alone at Graceland in her bedroom located off the kitchen and near the garage. It was a surprisingly spacious room with a king-size bed and typical bedroom furnishings. The room had originally been a maid's room but became Aunt Delta's bedroom when she moved into Graceland in 1967, and it was complete with a closet and a full bathroom with a window overlooking the front lawn. Many visitors touring Graceland don't realize the bedroom exists because it isn't part of the tour. Its door is located at the far end of the kitchen, slightly to the right. The room is behind a curtain wall on the left side of the hallway as you walk up from the basement stairs, with the jungle room on your right. Nancy says if you run your hand along that curtain wall to your left as you're walking toward the annex of the house, you'll feel a recessed opening behind the curtains. That is where the door was originally located, which led into that bedroom. Nancy writes, "We sense an occasional loneliness that Aunt Delta felt after Elvis, then Vernon, and finally Dodger had died. It must have been a terrible feeling to have been the last surviving Presley still living at Graceland. We cooked, cleaned, and ran the house essentially the same as we always had. We still decorated for the holidays the same as we always had. Aunt Delta occasionally had friends over, and the maids would prepare meals for them. But most of her time was spent caring for her dog Edmund, a Pomeranian Elvis had given her. After Edmund died, he was buried in the back pasture with a small headstone. Aunt Delta later got another Pomeranian and named it Edmund too. Edmund too was pampered and loved just like the first dog, and it led staff members to joke that they wish they could come back in their next life as one of Aunt Delta's dogs." Nancy writes, "Aunt Delta passed away in her sleep in 1993. She, like Vernon, suffered from declining health, and near the end was bedridden much of the time. Though she would be greatly missed, her passing was probably a blessing, taking her out of her suffering." Aunt Delta's funeral was held in the chapel at Forest Hill Cemetery, where she was buried near the original graves of Elvis and Gladys. Several dozen family and friends were there to give their last respects at the private service. After her death, the kitchen became part of the tour. Nancy says it's hard to pass by the mansion at night, knowing that the rooms that were once so full of life now sit mostly empty. Nancy writes, "I'm sure that Aunt Delta had never counted on being the last Presley to live in the house when she moved into it in 1967. Her death signaled the end of a magnificent legend. A part of Graceland died with her, the last occupant of a grand old house that had seen its share of good and bad times. It stands today, a mansion with many silent memories. I am so thankful to have been a part of the activities that took place inside Graceland." That's the end of the book. Thank you so much for following along with this series. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for the comments. I really, really enjoyed this book. It's so it has sad moments, but I loved like all the great stories that Dodger shared. That Aunt Delta and the hen and the purple pants. You can't beat that. So thank you again for following along, and I'll see you on my next book review. See you then.